General Museveni's son, another general, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, is still making threats targeted at Dr. Besigye, still promising to hang him on a tree in Gulu, that is in northern Uganda. He has made threats about, after hanging Dr. Besigye, executing Bobi Wine or Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, and has further said he wants the Supreme Court to apologize to him in person for the ruling that frees civilians from being tried in the courts martial. As introduced is Andrew Karamaji from Uganda. I'd like to begin by thanking you, the hosts of this news conference, and to say that you, our Kenyan brothers and sisters, are playing a massive role, as well as our Tanzanian neighbors, in addressing this situation. My first port of call is to say that this is a culmination of 40 years of family rule. We cannot understand this situation outside of the broader continuum in which it exists. There is no humane way to rule people against their will, and so it necessitates abductions, extrajudicial killings, and all manner of disregard for the rule of law and due process, which has brought us to this, what I think and can rightly refer to as a tipping point. As of yesterday, it was a brazen abduction, and overnight there were 4 abductions, all of them violent, but the one that has made it to the press is that of Fred Nyanzi, who was abducted by gunmen wearing balaclava and so on. Bullets were fired into the air to disperse the crowd that had gathered to resist the abduction. We also have a situation where the General Museveni's son, another general, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, is still making threats targeted at Dr. Besigye, still promising to hang him on a tree in Gulu, that is in northern Uganda. He has made threats about, after hanging Dr. Besigye, executing Bobi Wine or Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, and has further said he wants the Supreme Court to apologize to him in person for the ruling that frees civilians from being tried in the courts martial. Pertaining to Dr. Kiza Besigye's health, the situation is dire, actually worse than what we saw a few days ago when he was taken to a clinic in Bugolobi. The regime back home in Uganda refuses to heed the decision of the Supreme Court, the judgment of the Supreme Court. And as it is now, the medical union has spoken out and given a scientific medical analysis of Dr. Besigye's health, which is in serious jeopardy. Citizens who have attempted to protest this have as well been detained, and I should add, violently arrested, as some of you might have seen. So, as I end this opening, I'd like to say that this is a culmination of years of human rights abuses, disregard for the Constitution. The only difference now with this culmination is that it is happening openly, brazenly, and even though the Ugandan Constitution contains provisions on a legislature, an executive, a judiciary, that is chapters 6, 7, and 8 respectively, the military remains the primary institution that is riding roughshod over all these processes and institutions. The judiciary is clearly incapable of enforcing its own judgments because of the militarization of just about everything in the country. That's the situation. I'll be happy to take questions, comments, or queries about the same. But first, let my colleagues read the statement. Thank you.
The statement that is about to be read will be available to you in a few minutes. Let me invite Andrew to skip places with Roland.
I think that needs to be emphasized in the case of Kiza Besigye and all the political prisoners in Uganda is to first of all explain why it is very important as a region for the East Africa community in particular to shed light on it, but also to ensure that this ordeal ends as soon as it can. One of the outstanding matter that has happened is the fact that the elections coming up, both in Tanzania and Uganda. And it is very clear that this is going to be a year until January 2026 when we will witness a lot of suppression, I would call it, which includes abduction, jailing, even probably killings of political opposition or critics. So there will be an intensified action against it. Now, one of the other important things to keep in mind is 5 years ago, the situation was the same. We saw both in Tanzania and later in Uganda, there was a lot of repression that was happening because of the election. And the safe anchor country was Kenya. And that is very important for both Kenyans, but most importantly, the Kenyan government to understand the situation that it stands in. It is a situation whereby I would like to recall what Mwalimu Nyerere, who most of us will venerate in East Africa as a Pan-Africanist and as a person who was very key in pushing for the integration of East Africa. And this is an important point, particularly I'd like to address to leaders. He said that when he goes to international capitals, he's asked not only about what is happening in his respective country, but whatever is happening in South Africa, in Sudan, or as far away as Morocco, because we are all Africans. That attitude has to be the same when it comes to whatever repression or brutality. I would like to implore for the East Africans and the citizens in particular to understand that we need to unite against such abductions. Because leaders have to understand, to be critical, to be a political opposition member is not a crime. And more importantly, abductions, illegal renditions, and also illegal detention that we are seeing today in Uganda is actually one of the things that creates a stain on all of us. And for that reason, on the part of Tanzanians, on the part of East Africans, it is very important for us to call on the Ugandan leadership to immediately ensure that the rights of Kiza Besigye and all political prisoners are respected and that they're released and they're provided the bail that they're supposed to under the law. But most importantly is to ensure that their human rights is respected. Regardless of whatever personal feelings we may have, personal views, human rights is key. As we always emphasize all the time, utu wetu uko wapi? We have to always respect utu wetu. Asanteni.
Thank you very much. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions.